YouTube, what is going on? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we got a video here by Chibi Reviews. Solo Leveling is crashing the internet and here's why. Solo Leveling episode 6 has been one of the greatest episodes. Even I gave a reaction and I said this is anime of the year. So let's see what Chibi Reviews has to say. And if you guys like my video, please like and subscribe. Tell me what you guys think. And of course, let's enjoy the video.
My man Tusk crashing out so hard in this episode, going full monk mode, beating the crap out of people, letting go of his magic, that his anger was so much that it caused multiple sites on the internet to just straight up crash today. Some of them are still down, some of them are not. It's wild. It really just goes to show the anticipation for this episode of Solo Leveling, that it's in fact causing multiple sites to crash.
And you know, that is actually a good thing. As I said, you know, this is, I think, Solo Leveling's graduation season. Every single episode, I felt so frustrated with season 1, where the anticipation and the what we got for the anime was kind of underwhelming. But this season, I kind of came in it with open-mindedness, because I'm like, okay, cool, we saw what season 1 had to offer. It was like a foundation. It wasn't the best, but a good foundation. Whereas season 2 is kind of a level up, a graduation season. And that's one thing which I like about season 2.
Now, to clarify a few things before I go any further, I did have a few buffering issues when I was watching this episode on Crunchyroll, but the site wasn't down. However, this might vary from region to region, obviously, but I think mainly what this is talking about when it comes to Solo Leveling crashing sites, it comes down to pirate sites. I mean, let's be honest, I don't live under a rock. I'm not gonna, try to play the moral police. It's not my place to do. But a lot of people watch their anime on pirate sites. That's the truth. And this, obviously, this crashing of sites is mainly affecting pirate websites because they don't have the capacity to be able to handle so many people coming to their sites to watch the said episode. However, it is indication just how many people are excited about Solo Leveling, and, say whatever you want about it. Say you dislike Solo Leveling, say you, hate it or whatever, you think it's action slop and there's nothing else going on for it. It's very clear there is a lot of people that really do enjoy this series. And this episode in particular, I'm not gonna lie,
the best.
Might be my favorite episode. Like, maybe not in story progression.
Yeah, the story progression is terrible. I feel like Solo Leveling needs to take a episode or two where they kind of make it an hour. I keep on repeating this. They need to make it an hour so they can get all the fluff out of there. But so far, it's okay. It's good. It's good. I'm not going to complain.
But in terms of just the presentation of the action, okay, we're strictly talking about action. A complete 180 from my video last week. But in presentation of the action, this is probably the best episode of Solo Leveling to date. It's obviously going to change as time progresses if the passion and love that these animators have been showing continues on throughout the season and even into like Solo Leveling Season 3. But what I'm saying is that this episode is just straight up incredible, and it's been hyped up and anticipated for a good long while. A lot of people...
No, because the setup was so good. Episode 5 had the best, most amazing setup I've seen for an anime so far.
People that are source readers, myself included, have been basically hyping up this episode for about a solid week, actually past few weeks now, but definitely in this last week since the previous episode came out, because the cliffhanger we got in the last episode was pretty ridiculous. And so seeing actually another fight in an A-rank dungeon at that, a high-end A-rank dungeon, and Jinwoo going in to have to settle it and beat the crap out of these high orcs, it's some pretty exciting stuff. Like, full-blown action on display is so awesome here, and obviously we get to see a bunch of different individuals react to Jinwoo's overall power, because this is the first time technically within the story of...
People see Jinwoo's powers, abilities. And yeah, wow, of course, Jinwoo is the S rank now. You can imagine people are just like, wow, how did this guy become the most strongest?
Solo Leveling, that the secret's pretty much out of the bag. That people are now knowing about just how powerful this man is. He is not a run-of-the-mill regular D rank, E rank, C rank type of like hunter. He is S rank, and it is established even at the end of this episode when there's a conversation with another fellow S rank that Jinwoo's overall ability, his capabilities are already above some of the strongest S ranks in the country. And I think that, goes along with what I was talking about with the story progression, last week with the character. I don't know if I want to get back into that same convo. I might in a bit, but what I am saying is that there was a lot of establishing of his power, and that where Jin Woo is currently at with his strength, he is he's high S tier. Maybe not highest in the world, but he is definitely mid-tier S tier at the moment, and obviously he has no indication of reaching his peak. He is not at the end of his journey. Hell, there's multiple arcs that is still left to be adapted. We're not even like halfway, I would say, within the story. So clearly him already being at that tier alone is ridiculous this early on in the story. Anyways,
I feel like as well, what this show lacks is like story progression, because a lot of things are kind of rushed, no lie, but hey, I'm not complaining. It was an incredible episode last week. It's everything what we needed, anime of the year this year so far. This is number 1. Solo Leveling is at that tier,
Trying to say is that I love this episode for a variety of things. Obviously, the action sequences is the talk of the town here. The color palette, to the way the flame effects look, the line work. It's really good, man. Like, everything that was on display with this episode, getting to see the different techniques, the different summons and stuff. Like, this sequence alone is probably my favorite sequence of the episode. Like, look at the sword clashing. Look at the movement of the... Like, look at these smear frames, the impact frames here. Like, look at... That looks so good, man. Like, this takes me back to, like, some really high-octane, impactful scenes, like, in early shonen series. That's what this looks like to me. And it's just like, dude, this is incredible. I love the movement of the characters within these scenes. Like, dude, the slow-mo effect to the increase of speed. I don't know. There's little animation tidbits with the CGI incorporated into this that just adds so...
That makes it so natural, fluid, elegant. It makes the anime just shine. This is, like, honestly, graduation season, as I've been saying for Solo Leveling.
Much life into Solo Leveling's action sequences that you feel impact behind each individual blow and movement, and it really is a good, like, indication of how fast these characters are moving as well. And I just like that. Fundamentally, I think it's very hard for an animator to really detail an impact of attacks and stuff. It can be done. Obviously, it's been done time and time again. But I think it is a very...
I'm thinking of animes like Gallopreneur, where, like, when they were just throwing the punches, or even like a Naruto, when they throw punches and the character receives one, you can see sort of the impact.
Very hard thing to do and to grasp when you're trying to make impact on frames and movement and all that, and expressing character movement speed to showcase how ungodly fast they currently are going. And I think that a lot of these action sequences do prove the impact of the weapons clashing with each other, to the movement, to the mix-ups. Just everything about this stuff looks absolutely incredible. There's a lot of in-between details between these frames that will just go completely unnoticed, and not a lot of people will talk about, because there's just so much to process with what's going on screen. You can kind of say it's overloading your senses, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's completely that. I can't just, boil it down as saying it's overloading you, but it is definitely so much to take in, because the action feels actually like realistic action, at least in the setting. Obviously, this is a fantasy world. Solo Leveling is not real. Obviously, that would be awful if it was a real world, like we were actually in the world of Solo Leveling. But what I'm trying to say is that in terms of immersion, the movement feels realistic within the verse, and I just love how it's depicted, showcasing how strong these entities are, and how they are definitely above the other stuff we've seen thus far within Solo Leveling, besides a few minor exceptions. And it makes a lot of sense why, like, a high A rank group was not even really able to deal with this situation, just because of how powerful they are. Even Jin Woo himself admitted a lot of his soldiers are basically B ranks, and they're not really able to take on these high orcs. That's just how powerful they are.
Yeah, the high orcs are so powerful, honestly. Like, I love what Chibi's saying about the depiction of power amongst the characters. You can actually see it. And of course, the consequences of entering into battle. You see it. It's very obvious.
So it shows the difficulty of these dungeons, but it also showcases the difficulty of S-rank dungeons, because this is an A-rank dungeon. This is not even an S-rank dungeon. And it was clarified by even another S-rank in this episode that even he could not take on an A-rank dungeon by himself. That's how insane it is.
The conversation was, he was comparing himself to Jin Woo, where this guy with the red hair was comparing himself with the main character. He was like, yo, so if me and the main character were put in the same situation where I'm by myself and he's by himself, who would win? And unfortunately, one of his commanding officers knew the answer that Jinwoo would win because he can summon and he can fight. And he has so many different layers and different abilities that you only have one. So yeah, it's crazy.
So imagine what an S ranked dungeon looks like. And it goes to show just the terror of that. The ranking systems, why they take it so seriously is because of the overall global threat that an S-ranked dungeon theoretically could cause to a world if there was a dungeon break. Imagine if those high orcs in this episode did not get stopped by Jinwoo. Like, they were continued able to kill the entire party and a dungeon break event happened. They would have gotten out and a lot of people would have been injured before someone got onto the scene to be able to save the day. So you can imagine how bad it really is. So yeah, I mean, I love it,
Crazy.
Man. Like, this episode in general is really good for immersion and action. And like I said, it's a complete 180 from what I was talking about last week, because obviously I was talking about the inner workings of the story. But the action is very...
I bet he must be really disappointed by the story. Because the story, man, it's all over the place. I feel like it's just so all over the place. There's just... You can't give a story in 22 minutes. I feel like a lot of anime limit themselves with 22 minutes. That's why I'm saying they must have an episode where they do it an hour of just story, then leave us with the cliffhanger, so we can get established with everyone and established by the world. Like Re:Zero, I have no complaints on Re:Zero. Re:Zero can do action till the series ends because they established the few chapters in the first episode of season 3.
Important too, because sometimes the story can be detailed within the action, and there's some depth into Solo Leveling. I don't think it's the deepest well or the deepest ocean I've ever seen. I wouldn't call it a shallow puddle or pond, but I do think that Solo Leveling does have some depth to it, and its action sequences depict that, especially in the RPG category. Now, what I mean by the RPG aspect is that I love all the abilities on display, to curses, passives, and different techniques to be able to utilize to bring down your opponent. It's a very big indication that the author of this series is a mega fan of just
Dungeons and Dragons.
Because you could just feel it. You could tell that they probably have sat down and dedicated some time to tabletop, probably playing either D&D to some degree or some other form of RPG on tabletop, and probably a lot of RPG games, because a lot of these abilities and stuff are definitely stuff you'd probably see in something like that, and there's just been so many different depictions of abilities that it's clear that the author knows their stuff. They're quite the nerd, so to speak. Nothing wrong with that, but they are quite the nerd when it comes to RPG-like stuff.
That's true.
I do just love the incorporation of, like, different passives and stuff that this series uses, and the gradual power progression that Solo Leveling does. And I think this is a good segue to talk about that. Solo Leveling, obviously, one of the biggest complaints it gets, and I talked about this last week, is that it's an action slop fest. And yes, there is...
I wouldn't necessarily call it an action slop fest, because the story is good. Trust, like, the story is good, and it's supported by the manga. The reason why this show is actually animated, is because of the manga. The manga is so big. If only you knew, this is big. If you're a fan of anime, you've seen this manga unintentionally because it's big. It's not an action slop fest. I feel like I've seen worse stories where it's just action. Whereas this one, it's kind of like there's a reason to everything. I feel like
there's a lot of action. There is. It's good. Very good. But I do think that Solo Leveling gets a lot of flack for a lot of the positives it does. It is a very good power fantasy. And there are so many ways to make a power fantasy bad, easily destroy a power fantasy. But out of all the constant failures, it's some good. Solo Leveling definitely stands out among power fantasies, which is one of the big reasons to why it's so popular. Why Solo Leveling is so beloved is because it's a power fantasy that feels like a true power fantasy, and you could feel the progression from the first episode / chapter to the point we're currently at. You feel it with the multiple passives that Jinwoo continuously builds up and he forms on his body, to different summons that he's able to collect, to getting bosses as allies and different items, etc. You see this progression of his power, and it doesn't feel like it's instantaneous, like he instantly got it, because there is struggles. We do see him struggle here and there. It's not an instant.
Well, we saw him mostly struggle in season 1. I feel like season 1, I think that's why people call it an action fest, because of season one. It was kind of like, I was kind of underwhelmed, because I was like, okay, cool, season one has ended. I'm underwhelmed. Season two, I'm like, okay, cool, I see where they're going with this.
Victory. And I like that. The gradual progression of power. It's like, if you play any game, like, let's think of
Grand Theft Auto.
Dark Souls, I guess, could technically turn Dark
RPGs.
Souls into a power fantasy. I mean, hell, if you're someone that maxes out like your intelligence and your
Skyrim.
faith and stuff a lot, and like Elden Ring or Dark Souls, you could one-shot a lot of things easily with magic, and it can become quite the power fantasy easily. But Skyrim is a good example of a power fantasy if you do it right. Obviously, you can limit yourself, but what I'm saying is that a lot of people like to play games to have a sense of power, to feel like they're getting stronger, and you can see that. And it's done very well in solo leveling. And I think that's, like I said, one of the big reasons that draws people to this, because they're like, damn, if this was me, I'd be the exact same way. That's what probably a lot of people think when they're watching this show. Besides, obviously, loving the action and different stuff like that. But let's segue into the story. Let's talk about the story a little bit. So, obviously, as I briefly covered in this video, it was established that in terms of the totem pole, Jinwoo is stronger than some S ranks right now. We know this. Yeah. We don't know exactly how high up the totem pole he is, because obviously there's different countries that have S ranks and stuff that's probably way beyond maybe, the country Jinwoo is currently in.
Japan.
But I think that in general, Jinwoo is getting stronger. And as we've seen, and I've discussed myself, there doesn't seem to be any upper limits. No peak to his strength. He is just going to indefinitely get stronger until he just doesn't want to get stronger anymore, and he basically just, like, quits the game, so to speak. That's what it kind of looks like at this point, which is wild stuff. But, yeah, we get to see the world, or at least a small chunk right now, react to Jinwoo's overall progression, and I think that this is a very important moment, seeing, like, the party reacting to Jinwoo, but also seeing just, like, people that already were aware of his power, or at least what level he's at, seeing his power for the first time, and just how terrifying he actually is. So let's segue into that. Jinwoo is obviously a summoner. He is able to be a necromancer. Take the corpses of his enemies and turn them into his own power. We've seen this, we know this, and now some people now know this as well. They actively watched this man turn a corpse of a boss of a high-tier A-rank dungeon into one of his summons, and he named him. If I was those adventurers, like the hunters and stuff, and a part of the team to monitor S ranks, I would be horrified.
Same.
Because if this man had rotten, ill intentions,
he
could
finished.
Easily take over the planet, or at least countries, if he wanted. That's how easy he could do it, because of just how powerful he is. And I think that is an element to the story that has not been discussed a lot by the community, at least the anime community, because now we're seeing the level of power he's at, and what the power is of other high tiers, that he is capable of basically being a tactical nuke. He is someone that could just walk in and eradicate things if he wanted. Obviously, we know that Jinwoo is not a vile person.
He's a one-man army, I gotta say. That's what Jinwoo is, a one-man army.
He is not necessarily a completely good person, but we do know that he is capable of doing bad things if he must. So I do think that in general, he is a pretty terrifying character, and people's reactions to him are definitely going to be interesting, to say the least, because obviously when the world finds out and media starts covering him and stuff, there's going to be people that are going to praise him, people that are going to be mixed on him, and people that are going to be outright terrified and hate him, either out of envy or just because of fear of what he's capable of, if they find out what his abilities can actually do. So what I'm trying to say is that Jinwoo is in a very interesting spot as a character right now within the story, because once people find out about him, it's going to be interesting to see just like how the entirety of the world reacts to him, because his ability is unique, at least from what we've seen, and his potential to continuously grow is also scary. So yeah,
that's Solo Leveling. Honestly, one of the coolest animes that came out this season. Episode 6, 10 out of 10. It got a high ranking from IMDb. So yeah, I'm glad that it got a high ranking. It got, like, the whole anime community is praising this. A lot of people are saying this is ruining how they watch anime, but hey, it's a good anime. You guys tell me what you guys think of Solo Leveling. What would you guys rate it? And of course, like and subscribe on the video. I'll see you guys on the next one.